What is up, guys? Doomwick here, and welcome back to another video here on the channel and new cards. It is time for another new release, and Foundations is upon us. We had a recent video discussing the Foundations era of Magic, what that means in terms of the standard rotation, the number of sets that are being introduced, the universes beyond. All that stuff is a separate topic. Go check out that video. We'll link in the description down below. Today, we are just going to be discussing Foundation's cards, and more specifically, their impact on the standard format. This set is, I think, over something around 500 cards, so surely something is going to impact the standard format. And I've picked out roughly about 20 cards that I want to highlight today. They're not really in any particular order. Just, when I was going through the full spoiler, these are the cards that kind of stood out to me the most that I want to spend some time on. And I think there is some real bangers here. So let's get started. The first card I want to highlight here is Abyssal Harvester. This is 3 mana 3/2. It's a new demon. And more specifically, if you've been paying attention to Standard over the past couple of weeks and ever since the release of Duskmourn, Unholy Annex has been a huge player in the Standard format. And Unholy Annex is an extremely powerful card, but it requires you to have demons. And Abyssal Harvester is really the first 3-mana demon period, but also anything cheaper than 4 that's even remotely in the galaxy of playable. What I really like about Abyssal Harvester is the fact that you can use the ability on your opponent's turn, where you can kill their creature. On their end step, you can use the ability, make a copy of the creature token, and then if they play a better creature and you have another removal spell, then you can kill that and then make a creature that is better than what you previously had. And it is very important for curve considerations because you can't really load your deck up with a bunch of 4-drops. So if you are playing Unholy Annex, you really are going to want to consider some Abyssal Harvesters. Next one is a reprint from, I believe, Mirrodin Besieged or New Phyrexia, one of those two sets, Massacre Worm. Now, I don't really have any deck in particular that I think this one is going to go into, but there are plenty of reanimation effects. Actually, this would be a good time to point out Zombify. Zombify is actually a card that is getting reprinted. I was going to talk about it separately, but let's just lump it in with Massacre Worm because those two will likely be in the same deck. Zombify is really the first 4-mana unconditional reanimate spell outside of Rite of the Moth, but who wants finality counters? And Massacre Worm is a really good reanimate target. Now, it might only be a sideboard option because maybe you'd rather have Atraxa or Valkaboth as your main large creature of choice, but against the right deck, Massacre Worm can just kill your opponent on the spot. If they have a bunch of small creatures and you put this into play, all of their things die, and that seems very, very good. But yeah, Massacre Worm I think is maybe more of a sideboard option, but definitely a powerful one at that. And yeah, Zombify, I mean, there's tons of discard outlets. There's Rhoda, there's Collector's Vault, which pairs nicely with Enigma Jewel, there's Kitsa, there's just an endless number of ways to discard cards to the graveyard, along with Overlord of the Baelmerk. So be on the lookout for some reanimation with Foundations. Next up, we have Sire of 7 Deaths. This is the 7/7/7/7/7/7/7/7/7. I do find the flavor of this card pretty funny. Basically, everything about this card, there's all 7 abilities, 7 mana, 7/7. But what I really like about this card, you don't really want to be casting this one very often. But because it has 7 different abilities, it pairs very, very nicely with Urborg Scavengers, which is a riff on Soulflayer. And when it exiles a creature from a graveyard, it gains all of the abilities of that creature, and you put a counter on it. So you can imagine you play Urborg Scavengers, you exile Sire of 7 Deaths, you now have a 3-mana 3/3 that has all of these abilities. Again, as we talked about with Zombify, plenty of discard enablers, plenty of self-mill. There is probably going to be something there, and definitely want to be on the lookout for that. I want to give a quick shout out to returning, Skeleton Zombie Lord Death Baron. The last time that Death Baron was reprinted into Standard, people were playing it alongside zombies, and I don't really think there's as many zombie payoffs or other good zombie creatures, but there are 2 pretty good skeleton cards that I wanted to highlight here. Corpses of the Lost, which, again, another way to pump all of your skeletons and give them haste. And then Case of the Stash Skeleton, which is just a good 2-drop, makes a skeleton, and then you can flip it if you have no suspected skeletons and do a Vampiric Tutor. So there have been people who have been playing like mono black skeleton based strategies with corpses and case, and I think if those decks have any sort of shot at being competitive in Standard, Death Baron probably going to be in the mix somewhere just because it gives them all +1/+1 and Death Touch. So what I do like about Foundations, and I think this is a part of what they were trying to accomplish with the set, is it seems like there's a lot of building blocks for creature strategies, like very typal and lots of different creature types that are supported in the set. And I'm a big fan of that because I do like those kind of creature go wide swarm decks. And if you're a fan of creatures, this is quite the opposite of that. Bolt Wave, they actually printed Lava Spike, but arguably better because it deals 3 damage to each opponent, so if you're playing Commander, notably gets around Lane Line of Sanctity. But yeah, Bolt Wave I wanted to highlight here. There's another burn spell that we're going to talk about after this. Well, actually, I'll just do it right now. Boros Charm. So they reprinted 2 extremely powerful burn spells into Standard, which I really didn't think would ever happen. These sort of burn spells are powerful enough to see play in Modern and sometimes even Legacy. And if you look at the burn spells that we have, there's definitely something here. I mean, you have both Bolt Wave and Boros Charm. Then you have Burst Lightning, you have Shock, Lightning Strike. There's definitely going to be some sort of burn deck that is playable, and it is 100% going to be behind both of these cards, Bolt Wave and Boros Charm. Not a ton else to say besides they're very efficient burn spells, but yeah, very surprised to see them here, and don't be surprised if you see them in your next Standard tournament. We got to talk about the elephant in the room, or perhaps the elf in the room, in Llanowar Elves. This is probably, I would argue, let me know in the comments section down below if you disagree or agree with this. I think this might be the single most impactful card in the entire set for Standard. And it looks very innocuous. It's, just a 1 mana dork. How important can it be? But when Llanowar Elves is legal in a Standard format, it really changes the texture of the games. You need to be able to interact much more early and much more frequently because of the pace in which the Llanowar Elves sets the game. Turn 1 Elf, turn 2 3-drop, turn 3, they're on the play. Imagine a curve of Llanowar Elves into turn 2 Annex into turn 3 Archfiend of the Dross. Those hands aren't going to happen very often, but that is the type of start that Elves enables. Or even turn 2 Enduring Vitality, turn 3 combo kill you with the Valley Floodcaller. There's just a bunch of things and busted things that Llanowar Elves enables. Outside of the elf typal synergies, which I have a couple of cards after this that I want to highlight, but this card is just, like I said, going to change the entire dynamic of the format. It was already kind of leaning more towards aggression with the uptick in the red-based aggressive decks. There have been some additional Boros auras. There's been the Jeskai Convoke deck. But yeah, outside of just putting Llanowar Elves into, I think it'll even go into Domain, just so you can go turn 1 Elf, turn 2 Overlord, turn 3 you have access to 5 mana. You can just kind of do whatever you want. So I even think that Domain strategies will play this outside of just a bunch of creature decks. But the other thing that I wanted to highlight about Llanowar Elves that I find interesting, again, creature typal synergies, they're giving us access to 2 very, very good lords in the form of Imperious Perfect and Elvish Archdruid, both in the set. Now, if you look, they're also, I didn't have this one highlighted, but I can pull it up real quick. They're also giving us Dwynen's Elite. So you have a really good backbone of a good elf strategy where you have the mana acceleration, Dwynen's Elite, which is 2 bodies, and then the full 8 lords, alongside Leaf-Crowned Visionary, which is just a card that is from Dominaria that is also in Standard, a 2-mana lord, so you have up to 12 lords plus the good 1 and 2 drops. I think there's definitely going to be something there. You kind of have to look at what the rest of the elf pool looks like, but with that as your core, there definitely has to be something there. And next we have another returning favorite, or, maybe it's not your favorite card, but Omniscience. Now, the people who put Omniscience into play, they're usually up to no good. And this is going to be no different this time around. We are trying to find the ways to cheat this into play. There's actually 2. So the first one that I wanted to highlight is Kona Rescue Beastie, which is the 4/3 survival. If it's tapped in your second main phase, you can put a permanent from your hand onto the battlefield. The other one is Reenact the Crime, where if you can discard the Omniscience, then you can cast the Reenact the Crime, cast the Omniscience for free, and then kind of go from there. So there is a couple of different ways to cheat it into play. And again, as we talked about with the Reanimate stuff, good discard outlets for Reenact the Crime, Kona, you don't need the discard outlets, you just need to find the omniscience more consistently and then find something to do once you have the omniscience in play. But Atraxa is really good with omniscience because you cast it for free, refill your hand, cast those spells for free, so on and so forth. So I will likely be leaning a little bit more towards Kona, but I'll probably end up trying both. And Omniscience is, again, a very, very powerful card, and usually people are up to no good with it. All right, this one might be a bit of a stretch, but this also might be the boomer in me talking. Angelic Destiny. Now, this is a reprint from M14. I'm looking. I literally have it right in front of me. It's Magic 2012. I don't know why I did that. But when this card was in Standard the last time, people did play it, and it was a powerful card in the white aggressive decks. Now, I mean, that was 12 years ago. Obviously, things have changed. The power level has certainly increased, and I would not be shocked if this card was not good. But, I mean, it reads pretty powerful. If you can get them into a spot where they're tapped out, even putting this on just a 1/1, a random 1/1 token, you've now made your creature into a 5/5 flying first strike that when it dies, you get the destiny back, and they always have to respect it. It is obviously a very risky card. If they kill your thing in response, then you kind of get 2 for 1. But I don't know, if there's any sort of like white aggressive deck, maybe Dollmaker's Shop, some sort of token-based strategy, you have Warden of the Inner Sky, the Novice Inspector, Resolute Reinforcements, Regal Bunnicorn, like that sort of deck. Also, this giving Regal Bunnicorn flying is pretty sick, so I don't know, there could be something there. Just this one is one to be on the lookout for. And moving on, we have another reprint, Surrak the Huntcaller. When this card was in Standard before, during Dragons of Tarkir, this was an absolute house in all sorts of strategies. It was in Devotion, it was in green midrange, it was in green aggressive decks, and to be honest with you, I see really no different. I envision a similar play pattern this time, because this card just being able to, if you have the turn you play it, if you have 3 other power on the battlefield, which in your first 3 turns, if you're a green deck that can't assemble 3 power, then something went wrong. But if you have 3 power and play the turn you cast this, it's just a 4 mana 5/4 haste. That's not even that bad. But then every other creature you play subsequently is going to have haste the turn that you play it. And it even pairs very nicely with bigger things. There's also Galta Primal Hunger in the set, where giving a 12/12 trample haste is pretty good. There's stuff like Fear of Missing Out, giving that haste, some sort of Delirium archetype. There's plenty of things that you can imagine, just like a Glissa with haste in your green-black mid-range deck. There's just an endless number of things that, obviously, if a creature has haste, it's much better than a creature without haste. And Surrak just giving the ability to give that to all of your subsequent creatures and itself the turn it comes into play, it's a pretty good rate. This is a bit of a weird one, a Dropkick Bomber. So they're giving us a Goblin Lord. We actually, I didn't realize this, but we actually do have another Goblin Lord in Standard right now, which I'm going to pull up real quick, and Rundvelt Horde Master. So this is another Dominaria card. Shout out to Dominaria. Where, 2 mana 1/1 pumps all your goblins, and then the Dropkick Bomber, 3 mana 2/3 pumps all your goblins. So that's kind of your 8 lords. We're always talking about the rule of 8. If you can get to 8 copies of a specific card, that makes your deck more consistent. The problem is the goblin card pool is a little shallow. You might have to wait for a little bit of help from other sets in the future. We'll have to see how that plays out. But just something to keep on the back burner. Always want to be making sure that you are going to the Scryfall and checking the goblins from the new set, because 8 lords, maybe something in the future. Just want to give a quick shout out to Spectral Sailor. I don't think there's really going to be any sort of typal synergies with this one. There's not really a ton of spirits, although it is a pirate, needed a little bit of foreshadowing. But what I think this card is good in is the blue-black mid-range decks, where those decks kind of wanted more cheap flyers to pair with Kaido, because Kaido is probably the best card in those decks, and before they kind of had to settle for stuff like Fairy Dream Thief, and this is, I would say, a pretty big upgrade to Dream Thief, so now you have 12 good 1-mana flyers to pair with Kaido. There is Empyrean Eagle. I guess maybe you could consider doing some sort of blue-white flyers deck. I'd have to kind of, think about that, because there's not really a lot of flyers that you want to play in white, at least that I can't think of. Let me know in the comments section down below if you guys can come up with any. But I couldn't really think of a ton there, so I think the Eagle stuff maybe not quite as good, but just Sailor in blue-black midrange I think is something to consider for sure. Another reprint, Stromkirk Noble. This is a very, very powerful 1-mana creature that was originally an Estrada. The can't be blocked by humans, don't scoff at that. There is a lot of humans people play in standard, and I think that line of text is going to come up a little more often than you might think. And whenever it hits them, you put a counter on it, so pairs very nicely with stuff like removal spells, shock and lightning strike, monstrous rage to give it trample, and so on and so forth, even like Inti or something like that. But this one pairs a little bit less with the burn spells because the burn deck wants to play stuff like Monastery Swift Spear, Slick Shot, and then a bunch of burn spells. And then I think Stromkirk Noble just kind of wants to play in the more sort of traditional red deck with a bunch of creatures. Like, could go with the lizard that I can't remember the name of, Hired Claw. You can go Hired Claw, Stromkirk Noble, Emberheart Challenger, maybe Manifold Mouse, maybe Screaming Nemesis, like more of a sly or creature-based strategy. And yeah, but Stromkirk Noble, good addition to add to the arsenal of red 1-drops. The reprints keep on coming. Wiltleaf Liege. This is an absolute banger. I mean, as far as fellow boomers are concerned, you're probably with me on this one. This card was an absolute menace when it was legal, way back in Shadowmoor. And I don't know if it's going to be as good this time. There is Dryad Militant in the set, which is a hybrid 1-drop that gets double pumped by Wiltleaf Liege. But the thing you want to look out for with Wiltleaf Liege is gold creatures, because if your creature is green and white, it gets +2/+2. So if you can somehow build your deck in such a way that it contains, all or mostly green-white creatures, then you get this is a double bonus. And, the fact that it comes up against Liliana, I think in decks that were playing Obstinate Baloth, you might want to consider playing Liege over it, unless your red matchup is a little bit worse, then maybe you would want to play Baloth. But I think against non-red decks, you would much rather have a 4/4 that anthems even half of your creatures than a 4/4 that gains you 4 life. So keep in mind that there's that. And then, again, if there's sort of some sort of green-white beatdown deck, maybe rabbit-focused, because rabbits make a lot of creature tokens and they're green and white, I could see something there. More reprints. Heroic Reinforcements is up next on our list. This one, again, another one that was pretty good when it was in Standard, and this one pairs very, very nicely with lots of ways to make tokens, and it just so happens there's quite a few ways to do that in red and white. I'm looking at you, Convoke decks. Gleeful Demolition, still in Standard. Resolute Reinforcements, still in Standard. You have those that pair nicely with now War Leader's Call and Heroic Reinforcements to sort of form the backbone of this Convoke deck, and I think Heroic Reinforcements is sort of, in a weird way, like your second Convoke creature, where it obviously isn't, maybe not as powerful as Venerated Luxodon would be in the Pioneer and Modern Convoke decks, but it serves a similar role where it pays you off for playing a bunch of cheap creatures early. And this one is also way better after a Wrath, where on an empty board, Luxodon maybe even uncastable or just a 4/4 no abilities, but Heroic Reinforcements, 4 mana, 4 haste damage. So it's good post sweepers, and it's good if you're going wide. Great card, and I would not be surprised to see it in Convoke decks. I alluded to it earlier, but here is the second to last. We got 2 more cards to discuss here. Corsair Captain. Just wanted to give a quick shout out to this one because, I mean, there are a decent number of pirates that are floating around. There have been people who have been playing this Is It Pirates deck, and there's enough 1 and 2 drops that maybe you could consider this. It does make a treasure, which that deck does have artifact synergies kind of baked into it. So just something to consider. I don't actually know if this one's going to see a ton of play or going to see play at all for that matter. But I mean, the fact that there is already sort of an established Pirates deck, you gotta at least consider this one. And last but certainly not least, just wanted to give a shout out to Maze Mind Tome. Honestly, specifically just because of Enigma Jewel, where Enigma Jewel, here, I'll put up Enigma Jewel on the screen real quick. Enigma Jewel is an extremely powerful card, and one that I have spent way too many hours trying to make work in Standard, and mostly Standard, but Pioneer as well. It's a really cool card. It is extremely powerful if you can have enough good activated abilities, and before we really only had Collector's Vault as like a 2-mana artifact that you have like a good activated ability that you can sink mana into on turn 2. And now we have 2. So there's a little bit more redundancy on those opening hands that have Enigma Jewel, and I could certainly see that being a thing. I don't know what the rest of the deck would look like. I've tried versions in the past that were like, there was an Esper Tolvada deck that we were working on. utilizing the discard from Collector's Vault to pair with Reanimation. Now that we're getting Zombify, maybe that's a thing. Maybe you're doing some sort of like blue-black Reanimator deck. There's a lot of things to think about, but just wanted to mention the core of Maze Mind Tome, Enigma Jewel, Collector's Vault, and this is like a new sort of tool for those archetypes. And that is going to do it for Foundation's initial early look. I mean, this is just scratching the surface of the 500 plus cards that are in this set. I am very, very excited to get to work on this. What I will say is that I'm going to be doing a follow-up video. I'm probably going to try to record it tomorrow and get it up the day after, where some of these cards, I'm going to be brewing some decks tonight. I'm going to import them to Moxfield. I'm going to have links in the next video showing the deck list, but I want to kind of highlight maybe 5 or 6 deck lists with using cards from this video to give you an idea of where I want to start when Foundations comes out, because there's a very, very big push from WotC towards Standard, and I really enjoy Standard, and I want to share that enjoyment with all of you loyal viewers. So thank you very, very much for watching. I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did enjoy the video, please consider subscribing to the channel, leave a like, let me know in the comment section down below what you thought of the video, and most importantly, what is the card that you are most excited for in Foundations? And until next time, adios.